welcome back to the Way to Be podcast. This is where we talk about how awesome health professions, partnerships, and practice is. I'm Rachel Glade, and here with my fabulous co-host.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rosenzweig.
And this season, we're talking about auditory verbal therapy and intervention. And today, we could not be more thrilled to be joined by Dr. Aliette Alfano. So welcome. We're thrilled to have her here. And she's going to tell us a little bit about her story. So I don't want to have any spoilers right now, but just know that she's an incredible advocate for our profession and students. And I just can't wait for you guys to learn more about her. So welcome, Dr. Alfano.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We're thrilled to have you. So would you start us off and just tell us a little bit about your background? What are you doing today and how did you get there?
What am I doing today? Well, today, in the grand scheme of things, I am a professor at Florida International University. See above, this is what it normally looks like on my campus and around town. And my days are spent, for the most part, doing research, writing papers, writing grants, doing work for grants. I do some teaching with my grad students, and I do squeeze out a couple of small hours on Monday afternoons to continue to work with my deaf and hard of hearing kiddos.
Awesome. So tell us about how did we get here? How did you get to start to work with kids with hearing loss? We know you have a passion for working with children that are bilingual. Tell us about that path. How did that happen?
Sure. It started a long, long time ago. In 7th grade, my language teacher told us to learn the sign language alphabet. And we were supposed to sign sentences at our classmates and see if we could understand them. And I thought that was a crazy assignment, but it was fun. And then I thought, I really like this. Let me pull out my encyclopedia. Yeah, this was in the 80s. And I started learning some sign language that was in the book and talked about Native American signs and things like that. And I was like, that's really cool. I want to do more of that. And so I got the opportunity in my freshman year of high school. I started taking sign language classes in the evenings, at a community college. And when I went into one of the classes one day, my classmates she was a work study. She was a senior in high school. I'm doing her work study at the Debbie School in the University of Miami campus. And she said that it was a lot of children with hearing loss, and that they signed there. And I was like, can I go too? I want to see what you do. And so she let me go. I went and I met Lynn Mishkel, and Lynn and I are still very good friends, and we laugh about this all the time. But I got there that day and I saw all these teachers working with these kids. But then I saw Lynn and I'm like, you're not a teacher. What do? You're doing something different. She said, oh, I'm a speech language pathologist. And I was like, what is that? How do I do that? And she gave me some pointers and I'm like, all right, I'm going to become a speech pathologist and work with deaf kids. I was 15 and she was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And so that's what I did. I took sign language classes throughout high school. I volunteered actually at the Debbie School that summer. It was interesting because there were not a lot of Spanish-speaking teachers or SLPs. So a lot of times, part of my volunteer activities included talking to parents on the phone and talking, explaining to them anything the teachers had to say or the SLPs had to say. And then when I graduated from high school, I went to Florida State University for my bachelor's and my master's in speech pathology. Came back to Miami trying to figure out what's next and figuring that out. And then lo and behold, at a drugstore one day, in front of me is Lynn Mishkel. And I was like, hey, remember me? I said I was going to be a speech pathologist like you. And she was like, no, but great. Nice to see you again. And ever since then, I've actually done the most that I can to continue to work with her in different ways. I worked for 5 years, trying to work more with deaf kids. And it's interesting because then my deaf kids started to get cochlear implants and they weren't signing. But then like we had a lot of autistic kids who were signing. And I was like, really interesting, right? Like the way this all started to mix and change. This was, in 2000, 1999, 2000. And that's when I first started seeing the first kids with cochlear implants. So I was like, okay, well, what do I have to do with them different? Right. And I started taking all the CEUs and doing all the things to learn more about it, joined AG Bell, and just kind of jumped headlong into that. When I started my PhD at the University of Miami, I told them that part of my TA-ship was that I wanted to go back to the Debbie School and do work there. And they had really changed from a signing program to an auditory oral program. And ever since then, I have continued to work in some capacity at the Debbie School through my private practice or sending therapists. And now I'm actually a coach for the teachers to help the teachers with their LISL strategy. So that's where it started. And that's kind of how I ended up here.
Started in 7th grade.
Well,
it's amazing.
Sleep. Man, when do you sleep? My goodness.
So, Aliette, you mentioned so many things that we're going to circle back to, but you talked about that high school senior who was really only 3 years ahead of you at the time, but she lit the spark. And then Lynn, Mishkal, and her continuing presence in your life. Who are other people who have really mentored you and supported you along the way in your career?
I'd say there's been a few, and it's interesting because probably one of my first mentors was actually a friend, a colleague who was my same age. So when I graduated in 1998, I started in the school system and realized that I didn't love it like I thought I would, and started working part-time in a private practice. And there at that private practice, I met Kelly, who is my now best friend. I'm sure if you've seen me on social media, you see me posting about our writing retreats, my long distance work wife. So we met working together 20 something years ago. We graduated at the same time, and I started working there just after my first full year. So I had my C's already. So I guess this was 1999. And she completed her CF at that place, and she was quickly like moving on up and becoming the manager. So she kind of did some managing of me, and the boss was training her how to do presentations and the rest of us. And the mentoring she was getting from the boss, she started to pass on to me. So the boss did some mentoring for me, but then really Kelly became my mentor for a lot of things like, how to put together a poster presentation, how to do these types of things. And that was really cool. We started presenting at ASHA. Like we were still baby SLPs, but we were doing things at FLASHA and ASHA and things like that. And we went to Bilingual Symposium in Puerto Vallarta, like presenting some of our research. I was doing research with my kids there in the clinic. It was pretty cool. And we decided basically at the same time that we needed to learn more, that we were going to get our PhDs. And I went to the University of Miami, UM here, I stayed home, and she went to the University of Miami, Minnesota. The UM University of Minnesota. And we finished up around the same time. So she stayed on that side of the country and I stayed over here, but we've stayed really close. And so she's really helped shape a lot of questions that I have and things that I have, and looked at some different types of areas. Like we're looking at resonance. She works with cleft palate. So we're looking at resonance in hearing loss. And that's based on some of her work and what they do. So that's exciting. I think some other people that have really kind of helped shape my thoughts about things in life, I'd say Edie Strand was probably a big one for me. She came down to Miami for a great 2 or 3 day apraxia workshop. I was really excited about that and the research she was doing, and she kind of lit the first fire under me that was like, I have to go get a PhD. Like, I got to go do this. And following her, then I'd say Brian Goldstein. who was at Temple at the time. And I met him at Bilingual Symposium, and he kind of really encouraged me to get out there, get moving. So yeah, I kind of feel like they helped steer me in that trajectory to, get into higher ed and change from just being a clinician to being a clinical educator, doing clinical research, and kind of shifting things about. Like I felt like I knew I wanted to teach something one day, but I didn't think it would turn into what I do now. So, I guess it's been a mystery for me to see whatever pops up as it pops up.
And I was just jotting down some notes on a couple of things. I think you brought up so many just really important points. You talked about you guys were baby SLPs, but you were putting in those proposals at state and national conventions. And sometimes that can be really intimidating, right? Because you're like, oh my gosh, who am I? And why would I put together this proposal? What should even be in this proposal?
Yep.
So I love that you guys were I just wrote down in big letters, like brave. Like, that's so cool that you had each other and you were able to be brave about it. I think that's something that maybe some of our listeners that maybe haven't put in that state proposal or national, proposal might be, it is doable. I mean, worst case scenario, it doesn't get accepted and you can get some feedback on it to get better.
Yeah, definitely. And I've taken it upon myself now with my master students. I get them presenting as soon as they can. And I make them write papers and we try to get those published too. And I'm like, I wish I would have had that in my master's program. But I think my students come out really well prepared to do these kind of things, and they're thankful for it. So it's kind of cool.
We knew
Absolutely
to bring you on here. Way to be, Dr. Alfano, with those students. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, and I think it's great because you're able to become what you wish you would have had. And so you also mentioned in high school, volunteering at the Debbie School, a lot of your work, because you are a Spanish speaker, was working with the Spanish-speaking families. And since then, your career has really focused on bilingualism, particularly for Spanish-speaking children with hearing loss. Could you talk a little bit about what tips you would have for clinicians, whether they share the language of the family? Or what if I am a clinician who is monolingual or maybe multilingual, but I don't happen to share a language with the family I'm serving? What would your tips be for that situation?
Yeah, wow. How much time do we have? There's a lot that needs to happen when you're working with families. And this is even if you all speak the same language, right? I mean, think about it. There's a lot of knowledge that you need to have about child development, about how families work, about child and parent dynamics, all these types of things. But when we're talking about somebody that's coming from a minority language, I think there's even more that you need to look into. In the spring, I teach a class called, what's it called? I always call it bilingualism, but it's not called that. Dual language development and disorders. And I kind of layer on top of it an entire course on a whole section on cultural responsiveness. Right.
Okay, great. So we're going to get a semester long course in like 90 seconds.
Yes.
No pressure.
Yes, absolutely no pressure at all. So, part of what I do is I teach the students, like, what do we know about dual language development, right? But what do we see in dual language learners who are DLD or who are interlaterally adopted, or what should it look like if you're a sequential learner or simultaneous learner and all of these types of things. But really, I'm like, on top of that, you just have to be curious to learn about new things. Even if you think that it's your background, it still might not be exactly the way you were brought up. My parents were born in Cuba. They came in the first wave of Cuban immigrants back in like the late 50s, early 60s. The folks who are coming from Cuba now are not the same culturally. It is different, right? And I still need to be learning about how things are and what are things like. And so my students are amazing, and they're very culturally diverse. From a lot of them are Hispanic, but from a lot of different places. But then we have people from other places as well. And I have them teach the class about their backgrounds and about what things are like. And so really it's about being curious to learn about other cultures, being open to what there is, and then finding out if you're not the person who can do all the talking, right? Like if you don't speak that language, how you can either work with an interpreter or translator or work with a family member or a cultural broker of some sort that can help bridge that gap. Because looking at everything from a monolingual English American cultural base is not appropriate for so many of our kids, right? Of our families and our patients. So I think it's this continual interest in being curious, like I said, and actually learning about what you need to learn about for those cultures and for those folks.
I think even for those of us who don't get to sit in your semester long course, two things that you said that really stand out that anyone could do, even if you're long past your master's degree, being open and curious and recognizing, like you said, Spanish speaker is an umbrella that includes a lot of very different people, and even Cuban American. The experience of people under each of those umbrellas can be really, really different.
Yeah, definitely.
I also love that you said, if you need help, it's okay to find a bridge. We're not supposed to have all the answers, and we're not going to have all the answers. And so I love that you were, because I think sometimes the perception might be, oh, well, when someone reaches a certain point in their career, or if they're in a certain setting or higher education, they're like, oh, like they, some people get intimidated to even ask a question. And it's like, no, like we are still learning too. Like no matter what level you're at or where you're from, we can learn from each other.
Yeah, definitely. I learn things every day.
Yeah. Awesome. I think that's a great point. I would love to circle back too. You mentioned about you working with families, but then also that clinical education piece. Because I know that we may have we might have students that are listening to us today. What recommendations might you have for students that are maybe considering different graduate schools or, whatever the case may be, but they're really interested in working with diverse populations or, bilingual, multilingual families. When they're making these considerations, what recommendations might you have when it comes to that clinical education piece and how important that might be for their graduate training?
Yeah, I say that they need to be looking at what the different programs offer and really looking at what are the strengths of different programs and what they're interested in looking at. There's several programs that have like bilingual certifications or extensions, things like that. Our program has a bilingual emphasis where we have 3 dedicated courses on bilingual issues. And there's kind of an infusion throughout our courses, but also we don't have an on-campus clinic. So all our clinics happen in the community. So whether you like it or not, you're going to be looking at a lot of different multilingual types of events out in the community, right? And so if that's something that you're interested in, I think you need to look at what the different options are and see also if there's like specific professors that you're interested in and kind of like look around. I know it feels like grad school gets more competitive, right? But I feel like not putting all your eggs in one basket is important. We have so many students who are from FIU who want to stay at FIU for their masters. And I'm like, think broader just in case, like you need to look at, what else is out there just in case, right? You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's
broad. You also mentioned kind of the shift in the field that you kind of got into this being interested in sign language. And then by the time you had finished your graduate work and were practicing clinically, pediatric cochlear implants were becoming more and more common. And so can you talk a little bit about how you've seen the field shift and how you mentioned a little bit of how you kind of upskilled to meet the new populations, but what have you noticed over the course of your career, how things have changed?
It's been pretty interesting. Like I said, and you just reiterated, I started by learning sign language, and that seemed like a big bulk of the kids I started working with when I first graduated, like middle schoolers and high schoolers who, didn't have early cochlear implants, and working with them in ASL and in English. And then kids with cochlear implants started popping up, right? And they kept getting younger and younger, and like just seeing how language is being produced on children who have cochlear implants just blows my mind. In the summers, I teach oral rehab, and I normally start the course showing them some videos of some kids, and I'm like, do these kids have hearing loss? Yes or no, right? And usually they're like, no, that one doesn't, no. And I'm like, they all have cochlear implants. Like, these kids are all deaf, and they're blown away with the results that we're seeing. So it's pretty interesting. And I think in addition to that, a big change that has happened in the field, when I first started, my first kids, they were told oftentimes by the cochlear implant teams that if they weren't speaking English at home, that they weren't going to be implanted. And I remember telling families in Spanish, you tell them in whatever English you can that you will be speaking English. Then go get your implants and then come back to me and we'll keep doing therapy in Spanish, And that's kind of how it started. And that's the actual advice I was giving them in, the early 2000s. Sure enough, they, cochlear implant teams started to see that you can be bilingual and deaf and do well. And that, thank goodness, has kind of shifted. But I think that that's also been a really big shift in our field. I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
100%. I remember when I was an undergraduate, I was interning at a hospital's cochlear implant program, and there was one family, and the whole team said, wow, this family is so great. The parents were native Urdu speakers, but they've committed to only speaking English. And we thought, like, these parents are sacrificing, they're doing what it takes for their kid. And today we would give completely different advice.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I think we do see more and more this appreciation of the language of the heart and the home is going to be the best and most fluent model the parents can give. But it is crazy, Aliette, to think, like, what did we used to say to people? And I love that you told them, like, just go tell the team whatever.
I would tell them lie. I was like, lie and come back to me. We'll be fine.
Yep, and they were.
Yep, they were.
Well, I just think it's so great to talk about all of this. I think it's important because I think sometimes you hear stories, right? And you see things on the internet and there are some like not so kind things out there. And so I think to hear like, no, like as a profession, we've learned and we're going to continue to learn too, right? I mean, early 2000s, like to me seems like yesterday, but it's like, oh my gosh, like that's over 20 years ago. What?
25 years ago.
I know. What in the world?
I don't know.
And so, but I mean, truly just in that amount of time, our field has seen a very significant shift. And because of the evidence that has mounted and the successes that have happened and the people that are willing to stand up and say, hey, listen, this is what I'm seeing. This is what this data shows, I think this data show, I think it's great that everybody's starting to speak up on that and that we can talk about that here as well. You mentioned, talking with the families and kind of, coaching them through maybe some difficult situations. I wonder, are there resources or maybe specific references that you might recommend for working with bilingual families?
So it's going to depend on the language, right?
Sure.
As far as resources that are available, part of what I've done in my work at FIU is help to adapt several of the assessments that we have in English into Spanish so that they're culturally appropriate and linguistically appropriate in Spanish. And I'm actually starting to do some work now with the Haitian Creole speaking community as well. So I'm really excited to kind of be expanding. I'm learning Haitian Creole now and working with a Haitian professor as we kind of expand and work, because there's actually 0 assessments available in Haitian Creole. So that's kind of blew my mind when I saw that, which is a huge population here in Miami, and I know it's growing in the country. But I would say that for resources, sometimes you need to go into the community to see what exists, especially in languages that might not be well supported because Spanish is still hard to get a lot of different assessments and resources, but it's probably the one that has the most in this country, right? But we're still lacking in a lot. I did a study with the University of Miami there with their psychologists and their audiologists, and we kind of polled SLPs and audiologists on their knowledge of Spanish assessments. And it blew my mind that, some of our biggest findings, this is actually coming out now, we're going to be presenting it at ASHA, that, a lot, like 60, 70% of clinicians who worked with Spanish speaking kids had heard of many of these assessments, but a much smaller number are actually using those assessments. And then I'm sure this will blow your minds for both of you. They knew vocabulary tests and our TIC tests and language tests, but in the area of speech perception, auditory skills, like all the assessments that they listed were few and far between, but they used them with less than 5% with deaf kids. And I'm like, we're talking about deaf kids who need language, vocabulary, speech, right? All these things. But first and foremost, they need speech perception or auditory processing tests. And they're not being used. And that just blew my mind. Like, how are we not assessing this when it's like one of the biggest things we need to assess with this population? So yeah, I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done as far as resources. But we need to be looking at the communities and seeing what exists and how can we actually like expand what exists and do more.
That is fascinating and terrifying. And I look forward to that presentation. You have spoken about presenting at ASHA and then also being involved in FLASHA, your state organization. For someone who is a student or a new professional or even a seasoned professional who wants to like dip their toe into their state association or national associations, what advice would you have?
I'd say for students, they should definitely look at all the volunteering opportunities that ASHA and like the state organizations have to kind of like man booths or woman booths, or be volunteers, like to show people around. Like ASHA has some really nice opportunities for that. That helps kind of get them networking. And if they can kind of squeeze in with a professor or a colleague on presentations to kind of learn some of those skills, that would be fantastic. But actually that applies to new SLPs too. So I would say they should look at those volunteer opportunities as well and go to the networking things, jump in on those. And when they're having open houses or things like that, or, the exhibit hall opens, get out there and meet people. I know that I've definitely had my times where I'm like, oh my gosh, look who it is. It's so-and-so, like, these celebrity SLPs to me. And then you talk to them like, they're just normal people. Like, they have the same, questions or quirky things or whatever. And it just, it's kind of fun, but like, I think that you really need to get to know people. That's how I met you guys, right? Like,
yeah,
all the different things that we've done. Yeah,
very true.
Yeah, and you never know what might pop up later, right? I mean, like with your mentor, you're like, I mean, you may not even gone down this PhD path had you not seen somebody in the drugstore, like
yeah,
that's so cool.
Or maybe I wouldn't have co-edited a textbook. Like, crazy things
happen. Exactly, love it. So you mentioned about working on all of this, like really great, innovative work, right? Like whether it's, translating tests or, thinking kind of forward thinking projects. So my question is, where do you hope to see the field in, let's say 10 years? I feel like 5 years is like, well, not enough time, but maybe 10 years. Where do you hope, what are some things you hope to see in the field?
Oh, in the field, SLP or AVT or all of it?
Both. Sure. Maybe we can go down both paths.
So SLPs, we need to up our 8% of diverse people for sure. We are the patients that we work with are not 8% diverse. It is a much larger number. And I think we need to keep working on diversifying us as SLPs. And with that, the resources available, like what we've been talking about, right? We need so many more resources in so many different languages or dialects and things like that. I think that I would love to see that continue to shift over the next 10 years. And as far as AVT, I was very excited to work with Elizabeth as we kind of redid the LISL exam. And then I got to work with a group that finally, after I hounded them for years, of course, it was all about me. I'm the one that made them do it in Spanish, but but we finally got the LISL exam in Spanish. But I had been asking for years, and I think that's why they threw me into the English one too. Like, you want to do this, then we got to start at the beginning, right? And so I got roped into that, but I learned a lot, right? And so now we're looking at some other languages for the LISL exam, which needs to happen. This is an international certification. It needs to be available in multiple languages. It's interesting because I feel like we have more diverse AVTs than we do SLPs. But also, I guess that makes sense because AVTs are they're all over different kinds of countries. But I think that adding more languages so that we know that more people have access to AVT in their language, right, is just so important across the entire world, really. So I think I'd like to see that shift continue to happen.
Yeah, making sure kids and families have access to excellent care that they need in a way that's accessible to them. So speaking about kids and families, the heart of all that we do, are there any stories or incidents or anecdotes from your career that really have stuck with you that kind of are like those moments of, oh, this is why I do this?
Ooh, wow, that's a big one. I know there's definite moments. I have some kids that just parents, bring me their 6-month-old with brand new hearing aids, and they're like, crying and distraught, and like, I don't think my kid will hear, and where do we go? And then, fast forward 7 years, and they've moved to another city, and they send me a video because I asked to show my oral rehab class, and the kid's like, "Hey, Aliette, just wanted to thank you for all the therapy you've given me." Like, and I've been taking like video clips of this family while we work together, and just seeing, like, I always call him, he looks like a little fetus. He was like 6 months old when he first started with me, till like he's like a grown kid, and the things that he can do just blow my mind, right? So, I mean, those stick with me. Some of the other things that stick with me are time after time families who come and do Spanish AVT with me. And they're telling me that their teacher or their doctor or their whoever is telling them that they need to start speaking English to their...
Still.
And yes, still. And I'm like, you don't speak English. So why are you going to be speaking English with your child? Or their English is very, very basic. And I'm like, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Like, what your child needs is rich, strong.
Right, your kid deserves more than basic.
Yeah, and I'm just like, no, please don't do that. And like, this is still happening. This is still happening from SLPs. SLPs are still saying these things. Teachers, pediatricians, they're still saying these things today in 2024.
It's also fascinating to hear that it's happening in a city as multilingual as Miami. And so it makes you think, right? If that is happening in a place that is pretty well established as a multilingual hub, what is happening in other parts of the country?
This is coming from bilingual SLPs and teachers and pediatricians. They themselves are bilingual. But it's like these bilingual myths, like, persevere, I think, particularly in the area for children with special needs. Right? Like, okay, if you're a typically developing kid, like, sure, fine, you can be bilingual, it's not going to hurt you. But if there's anything else, like, let's make you English only. And I'm like, that is not what the literature is telling us. That is not what we know is good for families. That's not what we know is good for making you a member of a community that is bilingual. We're basically taking things away from you. Like, why would we do that? And it's still happening. And it still makes me crazy. I remember writing, I had a paper out. I forget what journal I had sent it to, but one of the reviewers was like, why are you talking about bilingual myths? Like, Asha already said that bilingualism is fine. Like, no one believes this. And I'm like, ah, like, this happens to me every day. How can you say that, like, we're over this, we're past this? We're not. We're not past it.
It's a good reminder, right? Even though the literature is clear and has been for quite a while, to assume that everyone out there has access to that literature, has understanding of that literature, has had continuing education and training is not an assumption we can make.
They have not. And last year I did a whole year-long project with one of my master's groups on what pediatricians know about about language development and or bilingual language development. And I have tried multiple times through multiple projects to get pediatricians to actually answer my surveys, and they don't. But one, anecdotally, the answer is, and from what I've talked to med schools and people in med school and other doctors and conversations that people have had with their pediatricians, the doctors don't have any background knowledge in language development. They have some checklists. And bilingual language development is built. So we got to do better.
Right. But the pediatrician is often the point of access for many of these families.
They are the gatekeepers to therapies. And, you know, a general statement like, you know, just speak English or things like that is devastating to families.
And carries a lot of weight.
I think this whole conversation speaks to the importance, you know, whether you're a speech language pathologist or audiologist or heck, even just a healthcare professional, it speaks to the importance that it's okay to encourage the families to speak up for what they feel is best for their child. Like we may be the one healthcare professional on their team at that time that is, you know, kind of a supporter for the family to say, hey, listen, like, if this is what means the most to your family, like, it's okay to say that. It's okay to say that that's the direction you want to head down, you know, what path.
But sometimes even the families don't know what's best and they think that English only is best. Yeah. And it's really like showing them that it's okay. Not only is it okay, but it's actually better, right? Mm-hmm. Like social, emotionally, for the family, for the child to be involved in the community, to have that, you know, relationship, even if the parents maybe speak more English, but to have that, you know, connection with extended family and things like that. It's that kind of information that I think that we need to keep getting out there.
Well, and I think you speak to the fact that language is about so much more than language. It's culture and it's connection. Ultimately, language is our connection to other people. And we want kids to take their rightful place in all the communities in which they would have existed with or without hearing loss or any other disability.
Exactly.
Okay, well, now that we have like solved all the problems for the professions, you know, I think let's move on to our rapid round of questioning. So this is the, you know, get nervous, you know.
I'm going to put 90 seconds on the clock. We have some rapid fire questions for you. You can skip or pass, whichever you like. 90 seconds on the clock. Rachel's going to have the first one. On your mark, get set, go.
Coffee, tea, or soda?
Tea.
Favorite social media platform?
Facebook.
Cats or dogs?
Dog.
What would your dream vacation destination be?
Ooh, Tahiti?
Morning person or night owl?
I used to be a night owl, but my kid's in high school, so now I am a morning person.
What is your go-to for surviving boring meetings?
My phone.
Netflix or YouTube?
Netflix.
What is your favorite kind of cuisine?
Ooh. I like everything. I like food.
I hear ya. Fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction.
What snack do you keep in your office?
Oof, nuts.
I think I know the answer to this one, but we'll see. City life or country life?
City.
What is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh, Total Eclipse of the Heart.
Love it. Sunrise or sunset?
Used to be sunset, but I'm probably seeing a lot more sunrises these days.
I'm very impressed. 90 seconds. I love it. We can all come to Dr. Alfano for our recommendations on the Miami food scene, any type of cuisine.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Alfano. And I guess there's really just one more thing left to say, and that is, way to be, Dr. Alfano. Way to be for advocating for students, for doing innovative work, for just being an all-around awesome person in our profession. And who knows, maybe somebody that was listening to us today might consider some of what we've chatted about and consider that maybe this is a way to be for them too. So until next time, just thank you so much for your time, and we will talk to you guys next round. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.